All right, you are looking at live images coming to us now from Santa Fe High School. Of course, this was the scene of yesterday's horrific attack on students and teachers. 10 were killed. At least 9 of the 10 were students. We don't have the exact breakdown yet, but at least 10 dead and 10 injured. 3 of those in serious condition right now, but expected to live. Of course, you're watching at things midstream. People left cars there, book bags, you name it, and they can't get back there. We're told until later this afternoon at the earliest to retrieve not only cars but anything else that was left outside the building, not necessarily inside the building. But authorities are going to allow people to do that. Students, teachers, anyone else who might have left things outside the school to retrieve either vehicles, possessions, but not to go inside. With me now, Pennsylvania Republican Congressman, Senate candidate Lou Barletta, on all of these developments. Congressman, thank you for taking the time. The governor wants to convene a summit of sorts, very much like Florida Governor Rick Scott after the Parkland shooting. And among the ideas that's coming up is to get a tighter rate on guns. As you know, they raised the gun buying age, particularly for assault weapons, to 21. And I believe all such weapons, you have to be 21 to own them in Texas. Obviously, this shooter retrieved them from his father's safe or gun safe. So it would be a different issue. But once again, the gun issue coming up. You're looking at his arraignment late last night, but your thoughts?
Well, the gun issue, could be debated separately if we want to have an issue about guns, but that won't do anything to stop what we're seeing, Neil. What we really need to do is very simple, is make sure that the Department of Homeland Security intervenes and uses its authority in treating our schools as critical infrastructure, like we do other federal buildings and other sectors that are listed as critical infrastructure. I'm on the Department of Homeland Security Committee. I'm also on Transportation and Infrastructure. And I'm a chairman of a subcommittee that oversees all federal buildings in the country. And Neil, you cannot walk in the Department of Education and do, what we just saw happen in Texas in a federal building. So we need to make sure that we treat our schools and give them the resources, and Congress needs to appropriate the funds to make sure that we do that. If they can't get into school, they can't harm our kids. And it doesn't need to be a gun. He also had explosives. So,
would you be for the
best way to stop it? You can't get on an airplane. You can't get in our federal buildings. Let's not let these people in our schools.
I understand, sir. But would you be for what they're kicking around now? And this is coming from Texas Governor Abbott, who's a very big Second Amendment fan, as you know. Speeding background checks, making sure that those who shouldn't even be considered to buy these weapons don't. This is similar to the kind of thing we saw in Florida. Would you be open to that?
I would be open to making sure that anybody who should not have a gun doesn't get a gun. Now, if we're talking about how do we protect our kids, that's not the answer. The answer is don't let people in our schools. I think there are two different issues here. And every time we continue to have this debate about guns, we're putting our children at risk. Because what we should be talking about, getting money to these schools, letting the Department of Homeland Security assess these buildings so that the next person can't get in there. We're wasting time talking about guns when that's not going to keep my children, your children, and everyone else's children safe. If they can't get into school, let's make sure our kids are safe first, and we could have these other arguments and debates as well, but that's not going to solve the problem.
But you are, and then part of what Florida did is to, get a better sense of locking down schools, hardening schools, limiting the number of entrances, et cetera, to your point, Congressman. Now, I guess what I wanted to be clear on here is whether you were open to stricter background checks, more immediate background checks, so people who have any, commentary that would be threatening or deemed threatening on social media would be, fingered for maybe getting a delay at the very least in that gun license.
Shouldn't we already be doing that? Shouldn't we already be putting more time into mental health issues? Shouldn't we already be looking at why are young men doing things like this? Shouldn't we be looking at a lot of other issues? But in the meantime, while we're doing that, let's not let people in our schools. It didn't need to be a gun. I mean, I understand what you're saying and what this debate is about, but my concern is we're still talking about it after Parkland. You know, critical infrastructure means something. It means there are resources to assess the properties and make sure people can't get in. And we're wasting time by not making sure we're doing that first, and we can have these other discussions, which I think are all warranted. People who shouldn't have guns shouldn't get them.
Understood. Congressman, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
By the way, we did reach out to the congressman's opponent, Senator Casey. He did not get back to us, but we've talked to him in the past. It wasn't maybe the recent past, but hope springs eternal. He will join us.